yourselves and maybe say a little bit about the context in which you want to talk to administrators about first-generation students. And then I'll introduce myself last because my introduction of myself is kind of where I want to start talking to administrators. So let's start in the back.
Very good. Hey. Okay, I didn't study for this. My name is Jeff Carline, and I'm at Siena College. It's a small little Catholic private place, and everybody looks the same, and everybody pretty much is assumed to have plenty of money. But many of my students are struggling to be there, paying a huge tuition. They think it's going to help them somehow be there because they've got the network and all the respectable name and things, and they are just completely ignored. So we need to somehow open the door to their interests. Trying to keep it quite short, too.
I'm Jessie Strive. I'm at Duke. I guess I'm interested more in learning how to help our grad students and admit more grad students who are first gen. I've tried and not been successful so far. I've talked to administrators about it, and they're like, oh, well, we have a race program, and just don't seem to understand that it's a different set of means. And so I've been shut down every time I've tried, so how to be more successful at doing something.
My name is Lindsay. I'm from Bridgewater State University. I'm a student there, so I'm trying to connect the administrators to the students and see how we can all kind of work together to make that experience for first-gen working class students a little bit easier on campus.
You're an undergraduate student?
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Glad you're here.
I'm Fred Hooven. I'm here because my colleague Gary Jones had nudged me into helping with the panel on healthcare. I'm in public health. I started a public health program at American International College, which is a school in Springfield, Mass. I'm not a first-generation student, and I've been for 5 years now, after teaching a lot of graduate students and medical students, trying to understand how best to work with first-generation students because we have so many. We're probably predominantly first-generation, very diverse, ethnically and racially diverse campus too. And it took me a while to realize that some students, it took till the end of their last semester at school to understand how to get the most out of college, and that was too late, and I want to do more. So.
Yeah, my name is Gary Jones. I teach history at AIC, and I'd like to learn more about how to help first-generation students, and use the appropriate language or pitch to the administration to get some funds. For example, we're in Springfield to bring class action in to do some of their good work with first-generation students, but the resources, the academic side of the campus, we're starved for resources, but the other side, the administration, the resources are there. So I'd like to, learn as much as I could this morning, particularly in using the appropriate approach to the administrators, talk the language that they will understand and value,
I'm actually here for the same reason as Gary. My name is Michelle Fazio. I teach at the University of North Carolina at Pembroke. Many of our students, or most of our students, are first gen, and getting the administration to actually develop programs and put financial support for these events. I've been inspired by several colleagues here that have been doing that work, but as at a state institution where first gen is our student body, there's a real lack of connecting to them and helping them. Looking for major help from you to fight the battle.
I'm Jeremy Casadas. I'm an associate professor at a small liberal arts college on the border of Texas and Oklahoma. It's called Austin College. It's nowhere near Austin. And a significant chunk of our students are first gen, and that cuts across a lot of different racial lines. And our faculty is, we actually have a significant. We're realizing how many of our faculty were also first-gen students, and so we have a rising interest in providing programming, but we just don't have much money for it, so we're trying to find just ways to use this.
Hi, my name is Ryan Paul. I'm at Northeastern Illinois University, which is in Chicago, and just to, I think, echo everyone else, Most of our students are first generation, incredibly diverse. We actively recruit first generation students. We have no institutions in place to help students navigate their experience. We have such a huge drop off between first and second years. It's such a, it's absurd. It's a tragedy. And one of the things I'm particularly interested in is push for online learning. We've just saw in our research how much our students struggle in online learning, and our university provides no center to help students navigate that digital space to succeed.
I'm Colby King, sociology professor, assistant professor at Bridgewater State University. Echoing a lot of the concerns from the folks at the Regional State Comprehensive Universities of Pembroke and Eastern Illinois, we have a majority of our students in first-gen or working class backgrounds, but it's taken a while to make it like an explicit part of the institutional identity, although that's increasing. So looking for ways to like continue to make that happen, but to find resources to make it a more permanent thing, and the support is kind of what you were describing, the various supports we might have. We've got a burgeoning student group that will be doing some activities around that too. But I'm also interested in like making sure we don't lose track of the class issue, as folks will sometimes substitute first-gen status in lieu of class when it really is a class issue many times. And also recognizing that, especially at the less prestigious institutions, a lot of the faculty and staff come from first-gen working class backgrounds, and maybe celebrating that as a value of public higher ed and ways to communicate that with leaders at the institution and stuff.
Yeah.
So I'm Dwight Lang. I teach at University of Michigan, Ann Arbor, and I'm also been the faculty advisor to our first-gen group, student group, that's been sponsored by the Social Department. We have 3,500 students who are first gens at Michigan out of 28,000, about 13%. The goal I've heard recently is to move that up to 20%. So there's a lot of institutional change. But we just instituted a first gen center, first generation student gateway. And I was involved with staff people and faculty and administrators in establishing that center. So I'm in a celebratory mode. I didn't think it would ever happen because there was a lot of opposition on campus to having a center for first-gen students. But I've witnessed institutional change as it started in the provost's office and worked down to the vice provost and then spread through the faculty and staff. So I have some experience here, if anyone wants to ask me about it, on how to develop sort of a grassroots movement to pressure administrators to do something for first gens.
I am Rosemary Bello-Truland. I'm assistant professor of sociology at Brookdale Community College in New Jersey and an adjunct in women's and gender studies at William Patterson, two totally different institutions. Brookdale is in Monmouth County, which is, it depends. Sometimes it's the richest county in New Jersey, sometimes it's second. But we have branch campuses all over the county, and the branch campuses are often not exactly the same as the student body at the main campus. We have issues. I'm first gen, blue collar, working class. I have a law degree, but I feel more comfortable with the working class kids. So I'm one of the very few full-time faculty who teach at the branch campuses in the lower socioeconomic, more first gen, more working class. And I think there's a total lack of just understanding about how everybody who comes to Brookdale isn't the upper socioeconomic that Monmouth County appears to be. And so I would like to be able to talk about that a little bit more. I didn't do too well trying to get people to talk about implicit bias, so I'm not sure I'll be too successful about this, but that's kind of my goal.
I'm not sure which way to sit, so I'll accommodate the streaming. So my name is Claude Taylor, and I'm actually a neighbor of my colleague from Brookdale. I'm at a four-year school in Monmouth County called Monmouth University, and a number of our students do come from Brookdale Community College, which is one of the two-year schools in our county. I'm in a transition period. I'm in the first full year of a full-time position that's been situated to promote and encourage first-generation support. So I'm in a celebratory mode as well. We have roughly 38 to 42% of our incoming class every year self-identified as first-generation students. So it's a fairly large percentage, and a number of them come from Monmouth and Ocean County, the surrounding counties at our university. So I'm here to find out more about communicating with administrators about the pressing need to support these students. Much of it is driven by an interest in retention and persistence to graduation, but also, as Colby mentioned, I think there are some really important class issues that get masked by first-generation identities, and so I want to hear more about how folks are engaging that. We have a burgeoning student group coming together as well, and I'd be really interested to hear from undergrads what they're doing to sort of build that and to reach other students, and I'm really excited for the opportunity to share ideas.
Great.
Also do this. Hi.
Yeah, that's cool.
I'm Pam Fox. I teach in the English department at Georgetown University. I'm also, I just finished my first year as director of graduate studies for the department, and so that is also giving me a different perspective too. I was a first-gen student, and so it's Georgetown is a lot like, I think, Michigan in the fact that most of our students are not first-gen, but there's been a push to increase that population. And they've certainly been at Georgetown for a long time, but under the auspices of the Center for Multicultural Equity and Access. And I think on campus that translates solely into race and ethnicity and not class background, even though it's explicitly stated that it's for first-gen students. So I guess why am I here? I have a number of reasons, right? Why I'm here at this panel, and I think one is to figure out how to, I guess to piggyback a little on someone's question, but to rephrase it, do we have to use administrators' terminology to get them about this, to get them to do something? Because I'm always torn about that, right? Secondly, just how to advocate more for grad students about this issue. And then finally, also, we do have a first gen, this was an initiative that just happened, really came to fruition this past year, where it was for first gen students and faculty. And so there's been a big campaign to make that more visible, and I was really appreciative of the faculty component of that as well. And I'm wondering whether that could be a next wave, of the movement here in terms of getting hiring practices to also recognize that as a component, a desirable component of diversity, et cetera.
My name is Christy Lanius. I'm currently transitioning between jobs. I'm leaving a job at the University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh. I'll be starting a new job at Kansas State. And in both institutions, there are some services and programs for first-gen students. They primarily seem to be kind of over in the student affairs side, kind of admissions, that kind of stuff. And I am really interested in what faculty members can do in the classroom. Also, I think I kind of position myself as in the middle of the sandwich between faculty and administrators, because I've been in a capacity as a program director and soon to be department head. And as a part of the lovely, resource alignment, I'm not sure what else called, and finishing up with the job that I'm leaving, I received data, and this is the first time I've gotten these numbers before, and it confirmed what I knew anecdotally. My institution as a whole serves a lot of first-gen students, but my program, Women's and Gender Studies, our numbers were double that of the university median. And so, I kind of knew that, both in terms of first-gen students, but also students of color, that our numbers were more than twice the university median. So trying to think about how to how to leverage that and how to talk about what we do as faculty and as a program or as a department, you know, trying to make the case to other department heads that you too can do that if this is something that you're invested in and care about, and you should. So trying to think about how to make that into something, you know, sort of at the beginning of thinking about that.
Yeah. Betsy.
Yes. For about a dozen years, I've been working with Class Action as the nonprofit that we run the annual Northeast First Gen Summit, where people, including from Bridgewater, people come from all different colleges. Oh yeah. So that's been really exciting and really productive. And we've also done the digital storytelling, which is, I was late because I was troubleshooting. It's not set up yet, but in 304, there's going to be a continuous loop of little 3-minute videos by first-gen students about their lives and their college experience. Anyway, so I have a really positive view from mostly being a nonprofit worker of this can be really exciting, this can be really empowering, this can raise a lot of class consciousness, this can help a lot of people. And so 3 years ago, I went into academia. I teach sociology at LaSalle College in Massachusetts. And so during my interview, when they were asking what I would bring to the college, I said, well, I have this experience with first-gen college programs, college programs to support first-gen students. And this dean, who would be the one in charge, being all the student success and student affairs and everything, says, oh, we would never do that here. We would never, the college is about 50-50, first gen and continuing gen, and she'd like, we'd never do that here because it would stigmatize the students. Turns out she's first gen herself. So, and then she's continued to have, not that explicitly, but that kind of like, no, we don't release those statistics of their retention rate. We don't make them a separate category because that would be bad for them. And I'm like, so what I've done is I started a first-year seminar on the obstacles facing first-gen and low-income students. So I've done it 2 years, and I'll do it third year. And so I get talking about first-gen issues with a lot of freshmen, and one of them really took it and ran with it and got herself like a work-study job and made a little small mentoring program where I think 2 upperclassmen and 2 incoming students were like talking to each other about being first time. But anyway, that's something.
So is your institution into color blindness as well as class blindness?
I know.
So I'm just thinking, if you're a first generation student of color, you really.
And then it's
like, yeah,
no, exactly.
we don't see color, we don't see class. We're all the same. Hi, I was just asking everybody to introduce themselves and talk about the context in which we are talking to administrators about first-gen students.
Good. I'm Sean McPherson, and I'm part of the delegation from Bridgewater State University. Colby King. And I got involved with some of the classical beyond the classroom group activities that Colby initiated. And my main interest really was in getting a student group started. And so that's what I've been working on for the last couple of years. And I think a lot of the conversations have evolved around the difficulties of funding. So, for example, we have a student who's here who's presenting on a panel, and we're speaking about first-gen experience, and that doesn't qualify for funding as quote-unquote research, student research. There are certain funding categories into which things fall. And also, this is a conference that occurs in the summer outside of the academic year, and there's different legislation for student groups and so forth and so on about what funding can be devoted to different times of the year and so forth. And so what we're interested in, obviously we have much bigger questions of getting students to participate and sort of spreading the word and so forth. But I found what's occupied most of my time really has been the issues with funding and the problems with categories of funding and the ways in which something like the first-gen experience is it or is it not relevant to the broader success of student
chairs, same as provost, just titles different, at Washington State University of Vancouver. And I want to tell you how I came to the dark side. So I am from a blue-collar family, first person in my family to go to college, and it took me, let me ask a question first. Do you all know what IPEDS is? I'm going to talk about IPEDS. IPEDS is the Integrated Post-Secondary Education Database. And that is, so this is something that all administrators will know about because it's a big deal. So every institution that's accredited is required to report data about the institution to IPEDS every year. It's part of what the Institutional Research Office on campus does. So this is information about student enrollment, about the cost of the institution, the demographics of the students, full-time, part-time, the numbers of faculty, so just the whole institutional research package of the institution. And so one of the things that IPEDS tracks is graduation rates. Graduation rates are a big deal. If you want to talk to administrators, talk to them about graduation rates because it is a thing on which all institutions are judged. And I'll talk more about that in a bit. But anyway, graduation rates. Except for the most selective institutions in the country, most institutions do not have a very high 4-year graduation rate. It hovers around 50% average nationwide. That it kicks up quite a bit for the 6-year graduation rate to maybe an average of like 70, 75%. And then the IPEDS also tracks the 8-year graduation rate. The 8-year graduation rate is only about 2% higher on average than the 6-year graduation rate. So if you haven't graduated in 6 years, your likelihood of graduating is really small. I took 8 years to graduate because I dropped out and I was out for several years, and then I went back and finished. And I still remember being really struck when I learned about IPEDS and graduation rates and all that kind of stuff. When I looked at that 6-year rate, 8-year rate, like, oh, holy cow, that was my first unlikely thing. It was unlikely I would go to college. It was unlikely that I would graduate once I had dropped out and not gone back in time to make it in 6 years. And it was unlikely that I would get a PhD. When I got my doctorate in 1992 in literature, that year, according to NSF data, NSF collects data on PhD recipients, only 2% of all people receiving doctorates in the humanities were first-generation college graduates. And I have not looked at the data again, but I don't think that that's gone up much. The numbers of people getting doctorates in fields like engineering is higher. First-generation people getting doctorates in the more practical areas is higher, but it's still not very high. So Washington State University just started a medical school and is super, super proud of itself because it has a very, very high percentage of first-generation students in its initial medical school class. The class is 60 students, and 15 of them are first-generation. And that's one of the highest representations in any medical school in the country. There's not a lot of first-generation doctors out there. So I got my doctorate, and I became a very oppositional faculty member, opposing the administration. Everything you're doing is wrong. And then I got the extraordinary opportunity. I was in a California State University campus, and I got the extraordinary opportunity to go to a new campus that was just being founded. I went as a founding memorized. And so the Associate Vice President for Faculty Affairs, who's the person who administered the collective bargaining agreement on the administration side, kind of had a nervous breakdown and retired kind of like that. And the provost asked me to take that position on an interim basis for a year. And I said, what do you really want to talk to me about? And he was serious. And I don't, to this day, know why I said I would do it. But I did. And I've been in an administrative position ever since. And so I started as Associate Vice President for Faculty Affairs, and then Provost, who got me to do that, retired. And when he retired, new Provost came in, and I eventually became an Associate Provost to her. And then this search firm contacted me about the job that I currently hold, and I said, oh, I've got no chance at this position, but why not apply? And in fact, I was their second choice. It's not the first time in my career that I have been the second choice, and I know this because I know the person who was the first choice. And they made an offer to this other person, but he turned it down. So then I got the job, and I've now been there 5 years, which is the average life of a provost in public higher education in America. So that's how I came to be where I am. And one of the crusades that I'm always on a crusade about something. One of the crusades that I am on currently is about the fact that when we talk about higher education in America, and when I say we this time, I mean the country, not just people in higher education. Whenever there's a story about higher education in Newsweek, for example, or Time magazine, and the cover picture is students, what do they look like?
The 19-year-olds playing frisbee on the ball.
They are 19-year-olds playing frisbee on the lawn. They are all very good looking. They're wearing polo shirts. One of them is Asian American, one of them is African American, and one of them is white. And the gender of those is kind of fungible, but usually it'll be, it's usually 3, and these days it's usually 2 women and a man, and we've got the racial rainbow. And okay, that's not who's in higher education in America. They're not 19 years old. They're not playing frisbee on the lawn. They do not live on campus, and they are not wearing eyes-on polo shirts. I want us to really start recognizing who is actually in higher education today, and it's us. It's us now. Anybody want to guess what percentage of students enrolled in higher education today, right now, are first-generation students?
Grand total?
Grand total.
35%?
35? Is that what you guessed? 30? Okay, I have a guess at 35.
I'm
Do I have any other
I'm
guesses?
not going to say a number, but I would say majority.
You're closer.
Okay.
It's about 50%.
Yeah.
It's about 50%. I'm so happy there's someone here from a community college, because the majority of first-generation students are in community colleges. Only 20% of students in four-year institutions overall are first-generation students. So the majority of students in higher education, or half or just a bare majority, are first-generation students, and they're in community colleges. Community colleges are wonderful institutions. They have an important mission. What's the transfer and degree completion rate in community colleges? Super low. Yeah. So these institutions are not serving those students as well as I think they probably could. Here's another, I'm going to talk a lot about data, because this is what administrators care about. Administrators care about data. Why do administrators care about data? Because everybody has a boss. The president of the university her boss is the Board of Regents, or whatever that body is called in your system. And then the senior administrators report to the president, and then there's, you know, a tree of people who report to the senior administrators. And so everybody, in a way, has to care about what the president cares about, who has to care what the Board of Regents care about. And what do the Board of Regents care about? The number one thing the Board of Regents care about, and it doesn't really matter what level or kind of institution this is insane. It's part of the insanity. They care about the prestige of the institution. And there's this huge upward pull going on right now. Community colleges want to become 4-year institutions and give bachelor's degrees. Comprehensive institutions want to become research institutions. R2s want to become R1s, and R1s want to become AAU institutions. That's the American Association of Universities, and it's the top 64 universities. It's insane, it's nuts. Nobody wants to stay with their original mission, but I actually see this as, in a way, a very logical reaction to the beginning of the devaluation of higher education, and the fear of the encroachment by the for-profit sector. And the for-profit sector does not serve our students well. And one of the things that I'm completely terrified about right now is that the institutions that are producing the highest numbers of PhDs of color right now are for-profit institutions. Yes, Corinthian colleges alone has, you know, just been really successful. They've been successful in producing PhDs of color. The problem with this, of course, is that most not-for-profit institutions won't hire someone with a for-profit PhD into anything that may be an adjunct teaching position. I had that incredible crisis of conscience actually face me this year, where we were hiring not for a tenure track position, but for a contract, full-time, non-tenure track position in nursing. And we only had 2 finalist candidates. One of them had awesome professional experience. She was a woman of color, and she had a for-profit PhD from a for-profit institution, which is a cut above something like Corinthian, because it's an institution that is exclusively nursing. But it's like, okay, here's my pull. This person, I really like this person's qualifications, but do I want to have on my website that I've got a faculty member with a for-profit PhD? As it turned out, she got an offer from another campus that took that, so I didn't have to make that decision. But that, you know, that was a really hard one. But the only reason I even considered it is because it was a particular discipline, and that was a particular, you know, a for-profit PhD that might have some merit to it. I would not see somebody from, say, Corinthian in quite the same way. So, you know, that's a big problem. So this push towards prestige, the IPEDS data, graduation data, retention data, is a lot of the force towards that. So a lot of people talked about wanting to retain first-generation students and students leaving after the first year and so forth. And all of those things are important factors. So the other data source that I'm going to mention now is the National Center for Education Statistics. And the NCES has 7 factors that, if a student meets one of these definitions, they're considered a non-traditional student. Interestingly, first generation isn't even one of these. So their factors for non-traditional students are someone did not go straight from high school. Someone is a part-time student. Student works more than 35 hours a week. Student's financially independent, is not independent of their parents. The student has children or dependents of their own. And the student has a GED rather than a high school diploma. Okay. Counting those 7 factors, just those 7 factors, 75% of contemporary students are not traditional students. So half of all students are first generation. 75% are non-traditional by one of those measures. And one of the things that's just now beginning to be looked at and make the news a little bit is the intergenerational mobility produced by higher education. And so I was thrown into a fit of deep depression about 10 years ago when I first saw the statistics about the increase in people who get bachelor's degrees broken out by income quartile. So in 1940, before the Second World War, anybody know what percentage of the adult population of the United States held bachelor's degrees? I won't make you guess this time. Oh, you're very close, but you're way too high. 5%. It was definitely an elite thing to have a bachelor's degree. And then we know what happened after World War II. GI Bill, influx of people, huge multiplication of the number of state college campuses in the nation, the creation of some of the huge systems of higher education, California state system, Texas, New York. And so the percentage of people with bachelor's degrees has constantly grown, but it's not as high as a lot of people think, because there's this ideology now that everybody has to go to college, right? Yeah, everybody doesn't go to college. 31% of the adult population of the United States today has a bachelor's degree, or higher, right? Bachelor's degree or higher. When we think of who's in college, we're almost still thinking of the pre-World War II picture, right, of the 4-year residential selective admissions. And there's still a lot of stuff in the news, right, about the pressure of how hard it is to get into college. Well, there are very few highly selective colleges. They are very, very hard to get into. They brag about accepting fewer than 5% of their applicants. The majority of colleges are either selective, not highly selective, but selective, which means that you have to have taken some prescribed range of classes in high school and have a D or better average. Or open admissions. And community colleges are open admissions, and 40% of students enrolled in higher education in the country right now are in community colleges, but we don't talk about them. And those are not all transfer track students, right? They're also enrolled in degrees that have various names and various systems, but that are associate's level degrees that are vocational or whatever. My nephew almost got an associate's degree in welding, but he dropped out and got a job instead. My nephew is a member of that statistic that drives colleges crazy. Only 14% of all students enrolled in higher education live on campus. So when we see the picture of the students playing Frisbee in front of the dorms, that is the extreme minority of students who are being represented in that. And so 33% of undergraduate students receive Pell Grants. Pell Grants are federal financial aid that are given based on low income status. And I can't tell you just the dollar amount because it makes a difference what your family situation is. But for a family of four, I think it's like $42,000 or something, which is the line below which you are eligible for a Pell Grant. So 1/3 of students in higher education are low income. Low income students are the hardest to graduate. And low income and first generation, you know, they're overlapping Venn diagrams, they're not identical. But that graph of who has increased the bachelor's degree attainment from 1970 to 2012 is the chart that I'm picturing in my head. People from the top income quartile went from 40% to 85% bachelor's degree attainment. People in the bottom income quartile went from 4% to 6%. So the increase in bachelor's degrees has not created greater economic opportunity so far. But looking at the enrollment statistics now we're poised to bring about much greater change, because 1/3 of students currently enrolled are now in that bottom quartile. So administrators are interested in graduation rates. The reality is that we have more and more students enrolling who are in the lower likelihood to persist degree attainment. So the question is, what are we going to do to take those students to degree attainment? So our institution's bachelor's degree completion rate doesn't fall, and the prestige of our institution doesn't drop, and the president doesn't get mad at us because the Board of Regents is mad at her. Right? And you know, this is a really big topic of conversation in a lot of national meetings of, you know, higher education administrators in the various organizations to which senior administrators belong. Is how do we increase our graduation rates? How do we foster student success? And the groups that have the lesser likelihood to persist to bachelor's degrees are first generation students, Pell Grant eligible students, male students across all ethnic and racial groups, part-time students big time non-completion rates, and underrepresented minority students, that is African American, Hispanic, and Native American students. Native American students have the lowest completion rates. So the question is, how do we make ourselves into an institution where those students can succeed? Because the other thing that's happening demographically is the United States has a dropping birth rate, has had for a long time, and the way that the population age waves roll, we are going to have fewer and fewer high school graduates over the next 20 years. So colleges that have ramped themselves up to higher enrollments to serve what was a growing high school graduate population, now those students are no longer there coming at the same rate. So colleges are looking to other ways to recruit students. There's 30-some odd million people in the United States who have some college and no degree. And recruiting, admissions, people are really looking at that population as a market of people to recruit into the institutions. They are automatically non-traditional students because they're not 18 to 24. And they are not dependents of their parents. And they're very likely members of one of those groups with the lower persistence and graduation rates. So we're bringing in students who are, from an administrative point of view, more expensive to educate because they need more resources. At the same time, if our institutions, and there's nobody in here who's from a highly selective institution, they have different, I was going to say problems, but I'm not going to say that because they don't have any problems. Harvard has 0 problems, okay? No problems. Well, they do have a problem. And across the entire Ivy League, all of the Ivy League colleges, the total number of Pell-eligible students that they have is 11%. And and they're starting to get some kind of negative attention for that. But it's a problem that they probably hardly notice. So in order to not have the size of your institutions shrink, in order to not have your graduation rates drop, you have to fundamentally change the nature of the institution to deal with the students that you actually have. A lot of faculty will say, well, we should just become more highly selective and we should get better students. Well, the answer to that is they're not there. They're not there for anybody to go and get. And let's deconstruct the idea of the better student. One of the ideas that I like a lot in talking about first-generation students, rather than talking about the deficit model, right? Here's what those poor first-generation students don't bring with them when they come into our August and hallowed institutions. That's the deficit model. The alternative model that I really like is the idea of cultural incongruity. That working class students, first generation students, they come with a culture. And their culture is a different culture than the culture of the institution. So, as if they were immigrants from another country, they face cultural incongruity, and that has to be bridged in order for them to thrive and flourish in the institution. So it's not how do we bring the unwashed up to our level, but how do we bridge, which means the bridge has to come from both sides. We have to build it out from our side, and they have to build it from their side. How do we bridge that incongruity so that they can thrive and succeed in our institutions? So those are my thoughts, my starting place.
Open the floor?
Open the floor.
You pivoted quickly from deep depression to optimism.
Yeah, that was a summary of like 7 years.
Yeah, yeah. No, and I want the I'm a glass half full kind of person.
Yeah.
But I'd love to hear more from you and from others about that in between, the getting from point A to point B. I used that graphic that you mentioned about degree attainment broken out by income quartile, and it's only moved from 4 to 6 or whatever it was.
Yeah, right.
And then, like in your next sentence, you're like, but we're now poised to.
Well, but now today we have 33% of undergraduates who are Pell eligible.
So I've heard, actually it was last year, for those folks who were at last year's conference, Sarah Goldrick-Robb came, and among the things that she talked about was the massive inadequacy of Pell Grants.
Well, yes, there's that too. Yeah, because depending on where you go, there's a maximum amount that you can get from a Pell Grant, and it's maybe $6,000. And that's not enough to. So I've had a very weird experience moving from the state of California to the state of Washington, because the biggest predictive factor for our students' lack of persistence to degree attainment is unmet financial need. And my first question was, what is unmet financial need? Because in the California State University system and the state of California, there is enough state-based financial aid that every student who's admitted has their full need met. Now, sometimes it's met with loans, but in addition to grant aid, but there's things that met financial need. And I have learned that I was living in paradise, and I really didn't know that because most states have, but some states have zero state-based financial aid.
Yeah, so I want to think more about the
Yeah, money is a big part of it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so I think money is part of the conversation around prestige. Part of the reason for prestige climbing is access to resources. I mean, I think a lot of folks in higher ed, regardless of what institution they're at, especially the folks with PhDs, whether administrators or faculty, have been imbued with that culture of the whole institution where prestige is what matters, right? So even if we're at a state university or a community college, that's sort of like the accepted background context, right? So in an environment where everyone is chasing prestige, how do we convince institutions to embrace building the bridge, that cultural bridge? Because I think there's a real trade-off between pursuing prestige and pursuing the bridge.
But the reality is, there is not some untapped pool of highly academically qualified, middle-class, white, clean, shiny, pre-World War II cover Newsweek students out there that the institution can draw on. So the way that we are going to, have to measure an institution's success is how well they can do with the students actually have.
See, I just think that will require a lot of additional labor, right? On behalf of faculty and stuff, like doing things that make their classrooms more supportive of first-gen working class students. But that cuts into the resources available for applying for grants, publishing research, all of those things, right? And
well, see, I think it's not just, and this is another thing that we have to start working on. It's not just faculty and what happens in the classroom.
Yeah.
I think a lot of it is outside the classroom.
Okay.
And there has to be a real partnership between academic affairs and student affairs.
Yeah.
And that, all the burden can't fall on faculty.
Yeah.
And so we have to create programs that bring in resources other than just faculty time.
Yeah.
So part of my position is like a bridge for that, because I work out of academic affairs, and I have the least time, so I teach one course a semester, but the other 80% of my time is dedicated to being a bridge for faculty. So I work a lot with our Center for Excellence in Teaching and Learning to help faculty teach in classes and reach first-gen students. But then I also work with student activities and student affairs to help develop the student group piece and sort of try, but that's a lot for one person. I mean, I'm only in the position 1 year, and it's a lot, but I think as we refine this and kind of work it down, having someone who can sort of be a bridge or a group of people, a committee to sort of be a bridge between faculty and academic affairs and student affairs, it's a way to kind of reach.
I'd be interested in how you create at a school, Gary is at a school where I think you would agree that we're proud of the number of first generation students we have. We're not in pursuit of prestige. We're in pursuit of staying in business.
Yeah.
And that sometimes in the business is an important word. If we want to continue to serve the students we're serving, yes, and we subsidize. I was just looking at our IPEDS data. Thank you. And compared to peer institutions, we provide much larger subsidies, much larger percentage of Pell Grant eligible students. But the focus is so much on business that it's all in the administrator's hands, and the faculty are not even seen as being part of that.
Oh,
and even though retention is one of the biggest factors, retention is we have a huge retention issue, and a lot of that has to do with the class that our students are coming from, with all the first generation students we have, and it stays in this administrative bubble where people are working. We had a retention committee that didn't have a faculty member on it, So,
Enrollment Management
enrollment
Task
management.
Force.
Yeah, so my question is, for those of you who are either in administration or have succeeded in working in administration, how do you, what approaches work?
Do you have a strong Senate on your campus?
No.
It is not considered to have any real authority by the board.
Yeah, that's hard.
And we've had major confrontations with the board in the last 2 years, and that's been a problem. But so we've also had provost vacancies, and maybe that's going to help when we have somebody good in that position. But I just am curious if people have done things that have worked in places where there's a big divide between faculty and administration, and then the students aren't getting what they need.
Yeah.
We're attracting these students, and we're not giving them. We talk about these. The number of students who are leaving after the first year, the number of students that leave our nursing that drop out of nursing. A lot of them come to me in public health, but we're not giving them the support they need, even though we have some programs, but we're not doing anywhere near what we need to keep them.
Yeah, and there's this old-fashioned mindset of look to your left, look to your right. 50% of you will be gone by the end of the semester, and that's a good thing for universities to be doing because it's rigorous. And I think we have to rethink what we mean by rigor, right? It means that we manage to, in whatever methodologies, help the students actually master the subject, not just ask them out. Now, in nursing, I actually think it's good to fail some students out of nursing because I don't want them to be my nurse.
They don't all need to be there. They're being told by their parents, you got to get a job or you're going to make a lot of money because we're paying for this. And I've sat with those parents who say, what are they going to do in public health? Tell me what job they're going to get.
Yeah.
And I'm like, it's not this. Okay. You're not. Really.
Yeah.
So, anyway.
Yeah. Okay, Pam, you go first, and then I got 3 more people to talk.
I'm just wondering, so for those of us who don't have top administrators who are like you, who understand this stuff, what are some strategies that you can think of to move them from thinking from a deficit model to this, I'm not sure what I think about the incongruity part of that, a cultural difference, right? Fit model.
I know. It's hard. It's really hard. To this day, I find it really hard to be me. I was at a conference last year, and I was talking with someone from the California State University Chancellor's Office who I'd known when I was in the CSU systems. And we had been in a panel that was talking about student success and so forth. And afterwards, I said something about underprepared, low-income first-generation students like me. And he laughed. He laughed. He laughed because he could not see me in my current guise as coming from there. And I keep having experiences like that all the time to remind me. And so I think part of it is if you can talk about specific examples, right? Here's our student, so-and-so, and this is where he came from, and look at the grade, and he just got he just got into a graduate school or something like that, whatever the student success story is. So, ironically, because I come from the field of literature, I'm now all into data. I'm totally into data. But the thing that moves people most is stories, people's stories. So I think that as a starting place, if you can talk about a student who, we gave an award to a student at our commencement who actually had been in prison. He had been in prison on drug offenses. He got out of prison and he was graduating, and he won the Chancellor's Award for Student Excellence, right? And he got to tell his story at commencement. And people are hugely moved by that. even people who are like pro-prison and pro-law enforcement and so forth, when they have the actual human being in front of them, you know, they're moved by that. So I think showing administrators the potential by pointing to actual students from your own institution, I think that's one way in.
Yeah, I mean, part of the problem though is that they measure success. Like their version of success story would be, oh, so they started here, but they got into Harvard Law School.
Yeah, well that,
Right?
Yeah.
But that's their idea of success.
Yeah, well you're the one person in the room who's in the highly selective university.
So, right,
yeah.
so that, I mean, so
Yeah.
if they,
you've
so
got a
I
harder
work for a nonprofit.
You've got a harder challenge.
Right, they work for a
Yeah.
nonprofit, that's like, okay.
Yeah.
But, you know, show me something.
I know.
I can really look at.
Yeah. That's a hard challenge. Yeah.
So this is actually related on that. Now this is going to sound very cynical. And, you know, when you reach my age, you just get very cynical. I wonder if in terms of, because one of the few other coins in the realm of administrators, it seems to me, is alumni engagement enthusiasm.
Yes, that's true.
And I wonder if there's some way, again, it's going to be very cynical, but imagining, I mean, my institution, many of our institutions do serve a lot of first-gen students. It's a lot. I mean, if an administrator actually recognizes how much your institution serves a large number of first-gen students, then in fact, adequately servicing the needs of first-gen students is an effective alumni. What you're doing is developing alumni who will do two things. One, you're launching them into a career that they will then become alumni who give. If you've created a quality experience where they feel welcome, they will become giving units to people. That's right. And the second thing is, I'm in my old age, I'm cynical. The second thing is potential. I'm just thinking that it's one of the few places in which I can feel okay about legacy admissions, right? Because actually, by definition, a first-generation student is potentially opening up a new line for several generations of people in a relationship. And so I'm wondering how that feels to you as a senior administrator in terms of thinking that what we're doing is developing the next generation of alums. It's basically a new field for alumni harvesting. Grossly.
No, I think that's a really good way to look at it, because alums not only give money, which they do, but they do a lot of other things, which is that they serve as a resource for current students. They often come back, and we in our College of Business we have a whole program where students serve as consultants to small businesses under the auspices of a mentor, and the mentor is a business person in the community, and many of our mentors are our own alumni, right? So they make those kinds of connections as well. So alumni are very, very important for money, yes, but also for, you know, more than money and just spirit, right? In the Pacific Northwest, if you are wearing Cougar gear, this little logo on my bag here, right? I've been going through security at the airport, and the TSA agent has said, "Go Cougs." And I had a WSU tag on a piece of luggage one time, and I was sitting, you know, in the seats at the airport, and there was an empty seat next to me, and the guy walked up and said, "Got a seat for a fellow Coug?" And it's like, you know, wow, it's this identity, and you know, some institutions really try to build that identity and that brand, and it's a recruiting tool, not just directly for legacy admissions you're talking about, but you know, as the recommendation network and so forth. So yes, I think these are our future alumni angle is, and you know, creating a section of your alumni association, first gen alumni is, I think, not a bad idea. Yes.
I want to talk briefly, about just adjunct labor being the engine of so many public universities, not just public and private, right? But at my institution, which I don't think this is particular anecdotal, once our students become majors at the English department, our graduation rate goes through the roof. We're at 75%. So the problem is between first, second year, where they're not in a department, in a home department. Because once they're in a major, and I'm just as guilty of being a full-time faculty, we have close relations with our students, we bring them to conferences. For the first and second year, they're just surrounded by adjunct labor. They're not paid a living wage, and therefore not embedded within the university and can't provide services like advising and that sort of network of help. And that's where all this loss starts to happen, right? This lack of investment.
Half of all student credit hours nationwide at all institutions are taught by adjuncts, like part-time contingent faculty. Yeah. But I think this has has also, in a way, become a self-correcting problem, because all of a sudden, a lot of institutions have realized they don't have enough full-time faculty to actually do the other work besides classroom teaching. And so they're saying, oh, wait a minute, how did we even get here? And if you talk to deans and what have you, it's like, no, we didn't set out on a program to do this. It just kind of happened because of bad budget times and so forth. But I think we're going to see a bit of a turnaround back towards full-time faculty, not necessarily tenure track, but full-time.
Our tenure faculty don't teach first and second year students, and I'm just as guilty. I get them with their, right?
Oh my God, so I actually taught freshmen in the fall. We're doing a new student success seminar, and I volunteered to teach one of them, and I taught freshmen for the first time in literally 20 years, because in my teaching career I've been doing all upper division graduate teaching. And there is this philosophy, you should put your best faculty in the freshman classes. And I totally believe in that, but do I want to do it myself? I do not! But yes, that is a problem. So one of the things that a lot of places are talking about doing, oh, and by the way, the absolute leader in student retention and increasing graduation rates for exactly the groups of students who have the lower graduation rates is Georgia State University and the University of the Tennessee University system. There's a dude from Georgia State named Tim Rennick who goes around the circuit talking about all the things that Georgia State has done, and there's another guy from the Tennessee system who does the same thing. And a lot of what they've done is with data. So one of the things to ask your administrators is, do we have disaggregated graduation data for our institutions? A surprising number of institutions don't actually have that. And you have to have it because you have to look at where are we failing our students, and you have to put it in those terms, right? Not where are our poor students who are failing, it's where are we failing our students. So disaggregated data, by disaggregated data, I mean you have to know your retention and graduation rates by demographic groups, not just in the aggregate. And so, and a lot of people are touchy about that, right? Because the potential for looking at that data and saying, well, our black male students just aren't as good is great, but that's not the problem. That is really not the problem. Back to people who had their hands up before. You were on our list.
This is kind of a strategic question. A lot of people kind of touch on this, but it seems like depending on how the institution imagines itself, there's a certain difficulty in speaking to upper administration about the way forward. So
about anything.
Well,
in some institutions. I know some institutions that have just appalling presidents and provosts.
Well, it's very obvious that, like...
I'm not cynical, I don't. I'm not old enough to be cynical.
The debate between prestige and addressing the actual priorities that need to be addressed. And so obviously, we're at a state institution that is a high second-tier institution, and in a sense, that's a very toxic environment because that aspiration is, the comparison to the universities above. Whenever you couch something in those terms, it's very convincing to upper administration, and the sort of emphasis upon prestige and so forth. But it's very obvious, based on experience in the classroom, that that's not where you're going to get the greatest payback. And it's not where the future market is. And so it's almost like an ethical question where I feel like I have to speak one language, if I want to get the money. But I feel, I feel very strongly that what you said is so important, that we need to have a kind of unified message from the faculty saying, wake up. You're advertising, because the advertising for our institution is exactly what you said. It's all, these sort of stereotypical images of wealthy students and so forth. And that's not who our students are. I mean, the disjuncture is just incredibly profound. But it's that sort of mindset, in our honors program, and in every aspect of our university that's getting money, is just very profound. It's very hard to kind of, it's kind of an ethical question, when you're trying to get the money, because you need money to support your students, but you have to couch it in this kind of elitist language, because that's what convinces the administrators.
Yeah. Well, there's the dilemma of my life, and that's my constant struggle. But I am fortunate to be in an institution that very consciously has a social justice mission. And so, given that everybody signs on to the idea of social justice, working out the details of that is not always as easy, but the idea that is part of our mission, because the campus was created by the state legislature, my campus was created by the state legislature, specifically to raise degree attainment in the region. So given that, right, then that's the ledge on which to hang every argument. Still, it isn't always easy, but there is that idea. So my institution is chasing prestige. Oh yes, we are. But we also have this social justice commitment. So we're kind of schizophrenic, but we can use that. Yeah.
Two thoughts. One is, I think recently as a CUNY president, maybe, who was making the point that they graduated more first-gen students than all the Ivies combined. I think CUNY president.
That's not much of a challenge, but
well, right. I like that kind of rhetoric as a way to reframe what prestige is or should be. Like, why do we let the Harvards determine what prestige is, right? I know why, but can't we redefine prestige for state comprehensives?
And there are actual efforts to do that. So the Washington Monthly has an alternate ranking system.
Yeah.
And that ranking system measures things like intergenerational mobility, number of first generation students. So the irony of the prestigious schools, the Ivy Plus schools, is that if you are admitted to one of those schools as a Pell eligible first generation working class student, your likelihood to graduate is actually much higher than at a very working class first generation Pell eligible student friendly institution like mine. And that is because those schools wrap all of their students in a lot of support. The most privileged students and the most at-risk students are all wrapped in this embrace of, you are a Yale student now, therefore you get everything, right? You get attentive advising. You get all the tutorial support you could possibly need, because yes, the best students make use of tutorial support. That's a big campaign we have going on my campus right now. That you don't go to the writing center or the math center because you're struggling. It's the smart, talented, successful students who make use of those resources. But the Ivy Leagues, they've had that attitude for I don't know how many generations. But we haven't adopted that part of those schools thing. So you've had your hand up.
Sure. Just a brief story about raising consciousness on the campus that resists wanting to think about first-gen issues. So this is my own campus in Ann Arbor. So there was a sympathetic vice provost in the diversity and inclusion office who I worked with. And we set up what we call the first generation student group. And it was primarily staff. And we met over a 3 or 4 year period each month. And staff people came in from advising, from financial aid, from academic advising, only a couple faculty members, and some students. But the group grew over a 5 year period. well, three or four, to about 45 or 50 staff people on campus who came to the group and networked with other staff people who work with first-gen students. And they've been working with first-gen students for 10, 20 years. But no one knew this. And so this awareness began to grow on campus. And fortunately, the vice provost for inclusion and the provost at the time, Martha Pollock, who is now at Cornell, who was also a first-gen, that helped. It eventually translated into, as I said earlier, a new center which started in the fall of 2017. But what really brought pressure on the administration was staff people who said we need to have a center, we need to have more concrete efforts to address first-gen needs. We need to have the institution publicly recognize that first-gens are here. So in your PR information, we need that, we need those data. To say, yeah, we've got 13% of students are first gens.
Yeah, don't ever overlook the power of students. For the universities where faculty maybe don't have the ear of the administration, students might have that ear, and possibly even people in student affairs who work closely with students might have more of the ear of the president than the provost does, because the provost represents those troublesome faculty.
Right, but when you have staff people that have been on campus for 25 years who have some status, who say, yes, before I retire, before I die, I would like to see a first-gen center, which students have been talking about for 10, 20, 30 years, but nothing's ever happened. So staff people take the student sentiment and translate it upwards to the administrators. Also, if you like to do this, you could write articles in local newspapers, have students interviewed, because newspapers are interested in a variety of topics. And so the newspaper coverage of what's going on campus can also bring great, well, I'll say this the best word, can bring great humiliation to administrators to say, well, why aren't we doing something?
Yeah, that doesn't always work, though.
Well,
that can really backfire.
It could, but in my instance, it worked. But as long as the articles are, fair and balanced.
Yeah. I think we are almost out of time. So I know there's some other people who I wanted to say something. Yes.
Yeah, Brookdale went through a whole bunch of stuff. Part of it being a RIF, and during the RIF, they got rid of support staff. We had learning assistants in every department that students could develop a relationship with. So that whole support system went. We've been through a series of revolving door presidents. I'll report back next year, but we just got our new president, started at Brookdale as a learning assistant, became a professor, moved up in administration, is now our professor, and actually, for a large part of time, he was also president of our faculty association. So I am hoping that, our board has been difficult, maybe not so difficult, maybe they've realized at this point that it hasn't been working, and I'm hoping that this will enable us to kind of get back on track. But, I'm not a research person. I'm in the classroom because we do, obviously, 5 is full-time load, plus I teach more. But I think the biggest problem for my students is they don't know how to do it. They didn't, and I don't know why they don't learn the skills that I learned. How do you study? How do I learn? When I get a chance to sit down with a student, when I get a chance,
this is why.
I know.
This is why they
Oh, please. When I get a chance to sit down with a student and I ask them how they study, how they learn, and I can see, you need to make a chart. This is how you learn. But they all work more than 35 hours.
Yes, right. That's a big deal.
The students who come, I can help, but so I think, particularly community colleges, need to realize that this is really what you have to do. This is what you have to do up front, and you have to make them do it, and you have to have something that teaches them this skill, because they don't have a clue.
Yeah.
And interestingly enough, a lot of times it's the kids who have special ed, who've had IPs, who have somehow been given the skills to be able to succeed, that will do better because they know how to do it. But most of them don't have a clue. How do I approach it? What's important when I read it? Nothing.
Yeah.
Absolutely nothing. And that's what we're lacking.
Yeah.
I feel like you hit the nail on the head with what my administration cares about, of the graduation rate and the retention, and like, are there going to be people paying enough tuition, or are they going to all drop out? That's really right on. And I'm wishing for a study or a document or a report or something that would convince them that having, student-run first-gen groups or support services, or I can employ one you that's great. That is there any data, specific data? Is there anything that would link the better outcomes come when we just take it at class action? We take it as an article of faith. Like, of course, stay more. If there's, if somebody acknowledges their first gen experience, and if they've got a support system and they've got good staff working with them, like, of course they stay more. But is that
There is an emerging literature about first-gen students and success. There isn't a particular article that I can think of that documents specifically the influence of a center or a group or something like that. There might be, but
somebody in this room, please do that study.
Nicole Stevens, who is a psychologist at Northwestern's Business School, she's done a study of if you just have like a panel and you have students from a variety of class backgrounds, and everybody talks about the strengths and the weaknesses of their own background, that those first-gen students have, I think, higher retention rates.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And the 1 hour difference article, Jan said that, I don't want to show my administration that, because then I don't think they can just do something for an hour. But
there's also the National Association of Academic Advisors, NACADA, has some targeted articles about academic advising of first generation students, which can get into that conversation about retention and persistence, because much of that is about mentoring, like the relationship of advisors to first gen students and how important it is for awareness of that identity and also the supports that are necessary. So I know there's been, between 2010 and 2014, there was a kind of a surge of writing about that in the college.
I just a quick question. I wonder, is there anything about the disconnection of advising from teaching, so that we have professional advisors for the first 2 years, and then you get your faculty advisors, which seems to work against the idea that having a relationship with the faculty member is important.
And I have the book, but I can't remember the author's name right now. But it's a NACADA publication, so you can find it pretty quickly. It's called Beyond Foundations, and it's a book. It's an edited volume about academic advising, and one of the articles in that text is about faculty advising versus professional advising, and the need to coalesce those, to bring them together, to have there be more synergy because of the gaps and absences.
Thank you.
Just briefly to the Bridgewater horn a little bit, we published a paper in the journal Teacher Scholar, which isn't like a regression analysis of retention or anything, but it does talk about the first-gen working class faculty staff panels and what we saw as impacting students from those. It's more anecdotal, but I think could be useful too. And it's an open access journal, so Teacher Scholar. Teacher Scholar, and it's like the post-colon's like the Journal for the State Comprehensive University or something like that. So it's And we write about that also in the handbook chapter that will be coming out in like a year or something.
Yeah, I was just going to jump in there and say that when the handbook comes out in 2019, one of the sections is on class and education, and there's a variety of disciplinary perspectives, including a chapter by Colby and Sean, but also some of the studies that I have seen is through that context coming out of psychology, and including educational psychology, that documents what are sort of best practices that result then in increased retention and graduation rates. Yeah.
Cool. All right, well, that's a very positive, hopeful, optimistic note to end on. Thank you, everybody. I'm really amazed by how many people were interested in this topic, and I think it's great. So, thank you.